we have a speaker tonight who has spoken at some of our other HoW programs. He was born and raised here in the town of Barnstable, and is now the principal at Barnstable High School. This is his just finished his 10th year. So he started when he was 18. He's now 28. But Pat is a real positive fixture at Barnstable High School. So Pat Clark is.
Drive now, okay. Just to make sure the video works afterwards. Excuse me just for a sec, guys. So folks, thank you. David Serow became a friend of mine when I was a junior in high school, and he was involved in the Echo of Cape Cod program, which was a retreat that was associated with the church. And I don't know how he tapped me and a few friends on the shoulder and said, this might be a good thing for you. Now, I don't know if I was running a little loose or if I had something to contribute or how he brought us to this. But David was a mentor for many people who are now 30 and 40-somethings around the town of Barnstable. And generally speaking, those of us who grew up in this town and now are here back contributing know that David and a few others, Steve Govea, our former athletic director, and a handful of others are really role models for the people who have gone on to be involved in business around this community, or they're involved in the schools or what have you. So just indulge me in a minute for the background. One correction with David's introduction. I moved here from New Bedford on my 3rd birthday, August 21st, 1975. My father said, you will never get a better birthday present in your entire life than moving from 148 Road Street in New Bedford to 209 Glen Eagle Drive in Centerville. Now, as I say, that's the tough side of Centerville. Not over here near the ocean. That's the north side over there on Old Stage Road. So back in the day, while there wasn't much tough about Centerville, I think that was the tougher side. Barnstable High School is a great place to go to high school. Graduate in 1990 and went off to Stonehill College. Stonehill was a fabulous school and made a lot of great friends. One's name was Danny Regan. Danny was the quarterback at LaSalle Academy in Providence, Rhode Island, which is kind of the Boston College High School of Rhode Island, and he was a heck of an athlete. Our sophomore year, he said, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And I said, oh, yeah, good luck with that. And he said, how about you run it with me? And I said, absolutely not. No way. I've never run more than a couple miles. We were playing club lacrosse at the time. And there's no way we're going to run the Boston Marathon. He said, if I finish it this year, you run it with me next year. I said, absolutely, because there's no way Dan, who was on a beer and pizza diet for a couple years in college, was going to run the Boston Marathon. Well, we go to Fenway Park. I remember I was wearing a pair of Tevas. We go to the Red Sox game. We're outside in Kenmore Square, and there's 3 guys, some pretty tough dudes from Charlestown, not to assume that they were car thieves, but I think they were car thieves, and they had a little Tykes wagon full of cans of Miller Lite beer, right there on the side of the road. They said, this is what we're going to do for the afternoon? How long is Dan going to be? So we did have a couple cans of Miller Lite beer, and about 5.5 hours later, Dan Regan comes over the hill by Pizzeria Uno, right in Kenmore Square, and looks at me and says, you're doing this with me next year. Well, myself, about 6 friends from Stonehill, and the 3 guys from Charlestown get in the course, and we run until security tells us it's time to get off the course. My apologies to Guy Morse. He's not here tonight. He's a dear friend. But we were part of the problem that year, which was April of 1993. The short version was, yes, the next year I did decide to run the Boston Marathon with Dan, and I decided to continue to do that until 2016 for 24 consecutive years. Some doctor friends who were smarter than I am said, between calf and Achilles potential issues, maybe it's time that you decide to try something a little different before you end up with a real problem. So the long and short is, the background is, I believe that the closest thing to utopia is the Boston Marathon. I believe it's the only event I'm familiar with, the only place I've ever been, where everybody is rooting for everybody. They will share their food, their drink, their spirit. They would put someone on their back to get them to the finish line. And a dear friend, Pete Stringer, some of you may know him, he's a local runner and ultramarathon guy, he says, what if our world was a little bit more like the Boston Marathon, day in and day out? And at the start of the marathon, it looks about like this, for those of us who are somewhere in the middle of the back of the pack. Approximately 30,000 people starting in the little village out there in Hopkinton, and everyone just kind of chugging their way along to get to Boston 3, 4, 5 hours later, or maybe more. So that's the scene. One of the images that you want to see when you're in the marathon are the spires at Boston College. Because you know you're about mile 20, you're probably pretty sure you're going to make it, you've gone through the Heartbreak Hill business, and you say, okay, this is going to work. I'm going to make it to a finish line. So on April 15th, 2013, when I got to this scene and saw Boston College, I said, if you don't back that up just for a sec, Dave, when I got to Boston College, I said, if I can put a little extra hustle on, I'll break 4 hours. Now that's not too spectacular, but it's not too slow. About 3 hours there, about 6 miles to go, and I tried to put it down and get a little speed going, and I finished in 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 17 seconds. Now the reason why that was a particularly good thing on April 15th, 2013, is that 4 minutes after that, that scene looked like that. Okay? So I was one of those people that they put in the Cape Cod Times and said, can we talk to you about this? And then they showed up at my office, and then they knocked on my door at my house and said, what was this all about? This was a war zone. Now, we're not here to get into the details of this and the experience of this, but people have asked since, how has this impacted you? I'll tell you, just a couple weeks ago at the 4th of July parade in Cotuit, when there was a couple of retired soldiers pulling a cannon down the street, when that thing went off next to me, I jumped. So you have to think about, you talk about your mental health and your well-being, and you think everything is fine. I went, whoa. So I ran back over, kind of headed towards the Cotuit ball field and sat for a little bit, grabbed a bottle of water and said, man, I don't like loud noises anymore. So this was a wild scene. One of the things, year after year in doing this, my family would go at times, other times they wouldn't. My friend Sean Doherty, who's a local business person, he oftentimes would get grandstand tickets, and the years that my children would go, they would sit right there, right in that corner, with my wife Amy. And thank God, that year, he was running in a little road race himself. Charlie was 12 years old. They have that race over at Hathaway's Pond. Someone else had something going on. So I got on the bus and I went with the Cape Cod Athletic Club, and they didn't go up that year. And it was absolutely a great thing, because at that point, you talk about that fight or flight experience that that was on a couple slides back, that's what occurred. So the reason why I bring this up, right, because this is an upbeat night and we're talking about our well-being. I think some things are clarifying moments that help us understand what the decision-making should be all the time and what the perspective should be all the time going forward. And I think this was one of those dates of shift for me, or clarity for me. The reason why is what you have control over, I believe, in our lives, and what we don't have control over, I think we should constantly be reflecting on. And I find, and I work with a lot of families in this community, right? Barnstable High School has 1,800 students, right? And we have our assistant principal network, our teachers and all of that. That's probably my phone, don't worry about that.
Shut that right off.
So when I find the families that are together and the students who are ready to move on to college, I think one of the features of that family, of that dynamic, is understanding kind of the serenity prayer. What is the difference What is the wisdom and what is the difference between those things you can have a grip on and manage, and those things that you don't? Now, I've done a fair amount of reading and research around Ego is the Enemy and a couple of life books. And I think if we're to put together a list of those things that we really are in control of, I think it's this list. And I think the things we actually are in control of is relatively finite. When we think it's infinite, I think our frustration between the reality of what we can impact, or what we hope we can impact, and what our positive dent in the world can really be, when there's too large a gap between those two, I think it leads to worry, frustration, the stress that you saw, people not sleeping right, people turning to alcohol or drugs because they believe that their impact, whether it's their ego or whether it's something related, that they should be having a larger impact or a larger force on the world. So the question is, Ryan Holiday's work around Ego is the Enemy, right, and related books, I believe it's your emotion, it's your judgment, it's your creativity, it's your aptitude, perspective, desire, decision, and determination that are actually the things that we can control. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else you can. And the idea is attempting to put our will to change someone else, I really have come to believe, is pretty close to a fool's errand. The better thing that we can do is be the example of what we would like that person to be, and like St. Francis of Assisi-like thinking, preach the good news and only when necessary use words. I think we talk way too much nowadays. The noise of the phone, your websites that you're looking at, you talk radio, you listen to, there's way too much noise. And how to live a life that's under that noise and is an example for people, I think is the best thing that we can do. And that's what I ask students to do for each other at school. It's what I ask adults to do for students and adults to do for one another in terms of who you are. Why would you, in snow, put 10 teachers and counselors and administrators on a sidewalk to greet kids when they come into school? You know why? Because it might be the only person who greets that kid by name all day long. So every kid at Barnstable High School should be greeted by name with a handshake or a fist bump before they get into their first class at 7:20. Why is that? Because the kid might have slept in their car the night before. And we don't know that. So if they say, how you doing? And you size up and say, David, something's a little off today, right? You know, most kids are going to say, you know what? Yeah, my folks are getting a divorce. There's drugs in my house. Life is not good right now. And they will tell you that. And you get that kiddo some kind of assistance that they need. But I don't think that showing up in that way is only for youth. I think we need to do that for one another. And in terms of how we're going to help improve someone else's life for them, I think it's simply showing up in that manner. Now, you may disagree. You may say you can muscle your way in to change someone else who needs to, and maybe that works for some of you. But by and large, I believe if we keep our focus on this simple list, the rest of that noise that gets in our ears, or comes the visual that overstimulates in our eyes, we can push away a little bit and focus on what's important. Now the question is, what can't we control? I think we can't control, you want to get in the clip? Everything else. Everything else. There's all sorts of things out of your control that if I just said the word right now, the collective blood pressure in the room would probably go through the roof. And there's nothing you can do today, right now, nothing you can do about Donald Trump. Not to get political. Number two, there's nothing right now in this room before you leave that you can do about global warming, climate change. Right now. But your blood pressure is going up right now as I'm saying those words. Possibly. Mine is. So the question is, what are the things that we can't actually control? Right? I don't think we can control anything else. We have to stay informed. You have to vote. You have to be concerned about the environment. You have to take care of yourself and your neighbors. You have to do well at your job. You have to love your spouse. You've got to do all those things. But by and large, if it's outside of that list, if it's everything else, what control do we really have over it? And what degree of our energy and worry are we willing to put into it? I would say the more you want to put into it, the more you're causing yourself some real stresses instead of focusing on those things that we can do. Okay? I'm going to click and see if the video pops up, David. I'm not sure if it does. I think this is a freeze frame, so I don't think I have the video embedded. I would ask everybody at some point when you have 3 minutes and 5 seconds, I guarantee everyone will think it is well worth your while to go to YouTube and go to a video called Above the Line.
You want us to go to do that?
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind pulling it up. The video is called Above the Line. Thanks, David. I do think it's worth taking a look. The basic concept is that all the research indicates that most people have either a surplus or deficit mentality throughout how they view their life. They believe that they have everything they need and more, and generally speaking, live in a realm of content. Or they believe that their life is constantly a deficit. There's not enough love, dollars, space, clothing, vehicles, real estate, travel, excitement, and they constantly are in the world of comparison.
222?
Yeah, it's going, yeah, it's,
Let me just go down.
yeah, above the line video, you'll see that. I'll click up and you'll see the cartoon. That's the top one right there. It's about three and a half minutes.
Right there?
Yep. So we'll watch it and spend just a minute with it afterwards, okay?
People are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and...
Yep.
Come on.
Arrow below that.
It's up the arrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back.
by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks, www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people...
Any questions? Just in terms of, I know you mentioned... Go ahead.
Please.
Is Barnstable any closer to getting Commerce Choice
in the school system?
I don't know the status as to where Calmer Choice was. There was some consultant work that was done X number of years back, but I know that we have had advanced training for some of our school counselors, but I don't think it's been under the Calmer Choice brand. I think that's a school system question in terms of school committee policy, etc. So, but you know, David Troutman is a personal friend, and some of the folks in Betsy Bowes, some of the folks who are involved in that. So, if we are going to go that route, we know who we can reach out to.
One of the things, Pat, that you mentioned, that student who walks in the morning may have slept in his car. And we live here, and so it's just, in an area where we don't think of this, as to how many children are homeless.
Right.
You want to just touch upon that a little?
Well, yesterday, it's interesting timing. Yesterday was a beautiful, in some way, but very difficult day at Barnstable High School because we had the memorial service for Sergeant Jason Sturgis. Jason Sturgis was a 42-year-old who died unexpectedly, and his work was with the Community Impact Unit, which was the team, Jennifer Ellis and a few others, the team working on issues of homelessness around the town of Barnstable. I think people, I think because we travel in our own circles sometimes, and we're amongst our same group of friends, or we're in our same neighborhood, I think sometimes we forget that we have, from the very wealthy to the very poor, all within 3 miles of where we stand right here, without a doubt. And yes, while we have students who are doubled up, or we've had students who are living in motels, or we've had very difficult situations, I think the responsibility of the community, whether it's programs through the libraries, the school, the churches, the YMCA, is to make sure that every student gets what they need in terms of respect, in terms of the services. But yes, the town of Barnstable, like most towns, has a homelessness issue. And it seems that there's a lot of people quietly doing a lot of good in this community, however, a lot who want to remain anonymous, who all of a sudden a family finds some housing. All of a sudden the student who has nothing has the money so they can register for football, so they can be involved in the drama program, and the money shows up. And you folks know who some of those silent saints are around our community, because all of a sudden things show up and things happen. So while we have a very difficult situation for a lot of families and a lot of kids, I can't imagine that there's a community who steps up more than the town of Barnstable quietly to make these things happen. Some of it, luckily, comes through our offices at the high school. Sometimes it's through a church or some other group. But yes, the issue exists, and it's something we have to think about, because the dignity of housing and work are the two foundational points that make everything else happen. So.
You have a question? Do you have a question for that?
Oh, I just wanted to know if this particular animation is current on the computer. Can we get it easily? I mean, is it still there?
Absolutely. And if you, Dave, if you just click back, if you click back, if you go to the collaboration network, you will see these kind of animations are done on all sorts of topics. As a matter of fact, you can have them done by artists, and you can register to have your own artwork turned into one of these with your own testimonial if you like. But they are neat little teaching tools as a way to start or end professional development, and gives people a little bit of food for thought.
Yes, yeah. and related to that, Ego is the Enemy by
Ryan Holiday. Yes, I would absolutely, I have spares in my office, I should have brought it. I think he is just a very, very interesting mind. He worked for Fast Company, and then went out on his own as a business and philosophical speaker. Some of it's rooted in stoicism, some of it's rooted in just good thought. But I recommend Ryan Holiday. Anything he writes, I recommend that you get your hands on. He absolutely rocks.
Any other questions for Pat? Pat, 2 words that came up during your talk. 2 words: community and connection. Right?
That's right.
And how important are those in terms of not only for your health, there is a study that has been going on at Harvard University for over 75 years.
Oh, yeah.
And when it initially started, okay, they took students from Harvard, and they took some children from a sort of a poorest section of Boston, and they started to study them to find out what made them happy. And they have continued that study over the past 75 years. They're now on like their third or fourth generation. And what they found is happiness isn't the result of what you've accomplished in life. Happiness is the result of the community and the connections that you make in your life. And the people that were in the poorest sections of Boston, they found were just as happy as the students who had graduated from Harvard and going on and being, quote, successful in life. So that's the connection. That's the, you know, we'll probably be doing a program on that at some point in time, or just the whole community in connection in terms of what makes people healthy and happy.
It's family too,
It's
family,
family.
I mean,
Yep.
family's very important, and
Yep.
family, some people come from crazy families.
Yep, no question about it. So,
Only one comment, Cuba, people were so poor, but they were happy.
Yeah.
And they had the community, and now maybe this is going to be destroyed.
yeah.
I will tell you, I believe some of the folks who are our most recent arrivals to this town are the people we can learn the most from. When I've got to know families from our Brazilian community and our Jamaican community in Barnstable, if you look at work ethic, the sense of family, some of these kids, they do not have, you know, the third car garage, the $30,000 spare car, and a whole closet full of Vineyard Vines clothing that's overpriced. They don't have it. But you know what? They come bebopping into Barnstable High School every day with a smile on their face, ready to work, and with a grit to try to do better than their parents did. And that's what they're doing at school. And I'll tell you, if you want to talk about maybe how, you know, getting some food for thought about how you want to run your business or how you want to run your household, I would say taking a good look at some of our students who are the more recent arrivals to this community would speak volumes. And I think a lot of people, those of us who've been around here a while, may be guilty of looking right past for some reason that, oh, they've only been here for a while, or that family just learned English, or whatever. I think that's all hogwash. I have learned a ton from those families as a leader, as a father, as a sports coach. There's a dynamic within the immigrant communities that is just something special. Yeah, please, Shirley.
Sure.
It's difficult to speak broadly, but you're a good resource. My question is, for those of us who aren't in daily contact with young adolescents or teenagers, what do you see, say, over a 5-year period that concerns you that the kids, if they are changing in any particular destructive or unpleasant or unworthy direction? What's the trend that you worry about in the horrible phrase, average teenager, over the years?
I would say there's two things. The one thing I'm most concerned about right now is vaping, without a doubt.
Okay.
The idea, Juul being the safe alternative and all that radio propaganda that you hear is absolute nonsense.
Right.
No students, zero, are smoking cigarettes.
Yeah,
Right? You're at a 0.5% cigarette use right now. Marijuana use right now for students is 3 times the rate of cigarettes. Vaping, in terms of nicotine, I would say is my largest concern for students not really thinking about the harm. However, on the flip side, the largest growth I've seen is more intelligent use of social media. Students becoming better educated with their phones, Snapchat, sexting, a lot of the nonsense that we had seen over the course of about the first decade when phones came out and overly consumed youth and their households. I think that we are in much better shape in terms of the education we're providing for students and parents having some straight talk with kids about how to use their personal technology without getting themselves in trouble or doing things we wouldn't want our kids doing. So I think there's a balance there. Guys, thank you. David, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.